friends, I know for you it's only been mere seconds, but for me it's been, let's see, since February 15th, it's February 26th today, since I worked on this guitar. And that's mostly because I just have other projects and other instruments and building those mandolins and all kinds of things that I'm doing. What I did, we're just about ready to put the neck in this thing, as you can see. And we left off, I think, with putting these strips on here to build this out. I've already taken some carbon paper, stuck it down in this slot, and rammed this in there, and you can see the dark markings there. And I believe you'll see the same dark markings on the other side in about the same place. And that just gives me an idea of where I really need to start. You know, you could start taking wood off and be in the wrong place altogether. So if you start where the high spots are and work down, you'll just be amazed. It'll fit. You know, it's just the way it works. So that's what we're doing. I just go in here and just cut off of that, off the inside, and I can already tell the wood wants to split going that direction, so I better come down this direction. If your wood starts to split when you're carving it, go the other direction and you'll be fine about 90% of the time. Yeah, and it's splitting going that way, so I got to go this way on this one. It's always dangerous poking a chisel towards you, but I'm more or less doing that for the camera here. Shouldn't really do that if you can avoid it. That's pretty good. Let's just see how it fits now, if it goes down in there any further. Do I feel like it's pretty tight? Yeah, it's actually a pretty tight fit. It's not moving or wiggling or anything. You have to wiggle it around and in and out with the carbon paper to get the markings. Well, now the markings are in a different place, as you can see. We got them here and here, so that's good. I also lift up on it to see if I'm getting too much down at that tells me I've got too much at the toe whenever it'll lift up like that. So down at the bottom there it's not touching. It must be touching more at the top end. I can even see from the carbon paper that made marks in there, it made a few marks on here. Doesn't lift as much as it did. It's better. So we're getting close. The thing we have to make sure is we get the neck angle right to the top. We also have to make sure it's right this way. And of course we don't want it twisted this way either. So we got a lot to watch. But the main thing is to watch that it's going to come out right back to the bridge here. And before you get too far into that, you need to check it and kind of see how it's running. One of the ways that you can test the angle is putting a straight edge across here. Now, this is a yardstick. It's not a, bona fide quote-unquote straight edge. But you can look down your straight edge and tell if it's got any bends in it. And this one looks to be very, very straight. One of DeResta's bylines is, if it looks straight, it is straight. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. The line of sight is the straightest line that you'll ever find. And so, if you have a good eye that you can look down that and see if it's got any, warps in it or whatever. To me, this looks really good and straight, plenty straight for the purpose that I'm using it. And what I do then is I lay it flat on the fretboard, as you can see here, and I hold it. Then I take a ruler that you can see the markings good, and this is a cheap ruler, but it's good enough for comparison purposes. And you can see the markings really well. So I go here, and I'll just measure it in millimeters for my friends out there in millimeter land. And this one, actually, this is only marked in centimeters, unfortunately. Centimeters and half centimeters. So that's not really good enough. And it's really only marked in 1/8 inches on the inch side, so we'll just go with the inches, even though that's not very good. It's right at 3/4 of an inch right there. And back here it would be 3/4 plus about a 16th, so it's about 13/16. So we've only got about a 1/16 of an inch rise from here all the way to the back of the instrument. That's not going to be enough. It needs to be a full 1/16 right here. So if it was a full 1/8 back here, I'd be reasonably happy with that. Now, before I get this whole thing carved, I need to try to work on that. And the way you work on that is you have to take some off of this heel around here. So I'm going to take a little bit off of this heel, and I'm just doing it by experience, guys. You know, there'd be a lot of guys that find a way to measure that. For me, you really can't hardly take too little off. You don't want to take too much. You want to take just as small amount as you can take off to nothing. So, you know, that's what we're going to do here. I may have to sharpen the chisel because it really needs to be sharp for this. Unfortunately, that's right where the serial number is. I'm going to put that serial number on camera. Hopefully we can see that serial number really good again. Hold it really still. Hopefully it'll focus really good on that. Because we're going to destroy that serial number here. Go by experience, and I'm going to cut what's going to amount to very little, maybe a 32nd of an inch. You have to be careful when you cut this. If you cut this way and cut off the end, you'll chip the wood off the end. It will chip off, I guarantee you. Same way if you go to the outside, it'll chip the wood off. You have to work toward the inside or you'll chip it off every time. And that's just a fact. So it makes it way harder to carve when you have to do that kind of thing. But you have to do that or you're going to pay for it because you will chip the wood out, especially on mahogany. And that's what we're dealing with here is mahogany. There we go. I think I've got a pretty good amount off of there. And it's pretty straight and flat. Like, as I mentioned, if DeResta says it, it's got to be true. He says if it looks straight, it is straight. And that's what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the heel and it looks straight. So it must be straight. And I'll work on that and show you what that looks like when I'm done. Well, I worked on this off camera and got this heel better. And if you put this on here like so now, it measures 3/4 of an inch, which is 12/16 down here. It measures 14/16 up here, so it's an 1/8 of an inch taller back here. So that's an 1/8 of an inch over the full length of the guitar, which still isn't excessive by any stretch, but that's better, and now we're in the right direction. I'm going to leave it there for a little while till we get a little bit closer to the fit here, and if we need to take some more off, we'll take some more off. But right now, this neck is fitting absolutely snug tight. Couldn't get it any tighter, I don't think. You can see the different various high spots there. And on that side, various high spots. And the more high spots you see, probably for the most part, the better off you are, because that means it's making contact in more places. Now, another thing I should do, and I haven't done it yet, is to go in there and clean the inside of that a little bit more. And I think I'll do that on this fit here. I'll go ahead and trim this down because we got plenty to work with. But I think I'll go in there and clean off the sides of the dovetail on the inside there just to make sure they're real smooth and clean. And I haven't really done that yet. I'll tell you another secret that you can do. As I was cutting the heel of this off, you know, and I obviously you can use straight edges like this and make sure it's straight across there, and I did that. But you check it this way and make sure that it's flat the full length. And what you can do is take if it's a steel straight edge like this, you can drag it across there, kind of like a scraper. And that scraping action will mark the high spots that you can knock off. they will be a little shinier or whatever, and you can see them, and then you can knock them off again. And that's what I did to make sure it's really flat. It's pretty clean. I think we'll call that good enough. Put this back in there. Each time it goes just a little bit further. I'm lifting up, and it looks like the toe is loose again. So that means there's probably some more that needs to be taken out of the upper part here. Toe's better now. It's still a little bit loose, but not as bad as it was. Going to check my angle just to make sure we're staying reasonably consistent. Now we're down to, it's gone in a lot deeper, so we're about almost 5/8 there. And we're just above 3/4 back here, so we're holding a pretty good angle. So that's what we want. Is I'm going to clean that up before I get too far along, and then, you know, then it won't fit if you wait till the end to do this. So I'll clean that up a little bit more too. And I'm just using scraping action with the chisel here. Doing this more for the camera because it's not a very good way to hold it. It's awkward to me, but it works. And also the same way down here, if you take more off down low, then the neck angle is going to change a little bit too. And I will just kind of look this over to see if there's any high spots now. And each time you do anything, you should test fit at your neck because every time it changes it. And we're down quite a bit now from where we were. And now you can see when I pick up on it, it doesn't wobble, it's tight in there. Let me just double check because we're getting close now to the final deal here. I can tell there will still need to be more angle because we're getting close to this up here. And it's further than this has to go. I mean, it's almost the same. Let's try to see if we can figure that out. This is almost a full centimeter, and this is just barely a hair over a centimeter. This is just a hair under a centimeter. This is a hair under, this is a hair over, meaning when we push this down, this is almost going to touch. So we still need more angle, and I'm going to go ahead and put that angle in there now. Because now is the time to do it, to get some of that angle in there before you get it all the way to the bottom. Otherwise your joint's going to be loose. I think I may have this thing fitted up just right. I haven't tested it this last time yet. The last time I tested it, it almost went all the way down. I would say within less than 1/16 of an inch for sure of going all the way down. It was a couple of millimeters high here still, which is good. I would prefer 3 millimeters, I think, and I really haven't measured it in millimeters before, so I'm kind of guessing on that. And I think I just got it all the way in there. I think it's all the way down. So let's see about how many millimeters we are high here. Barely 2. I was hoping it would be a little bit higher than that. 2 millimeters is roughly about 1/16 of an inch, which is, I can live with that. I've also got this bridge relatively thick compared to where we were, so we can always take the bridge down a little bit, and if we need to. I don't really think I want to do much more to this joint because I've got it absolutely perfectly tight. One of the tests that I like to do is to look down it and see what it looks like. I haven't even looked down this one yet because I was just going by measurements. It's looking pretty darn good. Wouldn't hurt it, in my opinion, if it was just a hair lower yet. But I don't think I can get there without a little bit of trouble, and I sure don't want no trouble. A lot of people love to leave this big gap here. I'm not a big fan of that big gap myself. What I think I'll do is cut a very thin wedge. I won't drive it all the way down in there, but just this top part. And that way, if you ever have to remove it, it's not that hard to remove. And I think what I'll do is I'll drive that wedge in there. That'll force that neck just even ever so slightly more, and more importantly, keep it from coming back any. As long as it stays where it's at, I think we're perfectly fine. If it comes back, we got problems. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to get a wedge that fits all the way across here, that I can kind of tap into place when I get the glue in there. That'll also make the glue joint really tight, and I think that'll keep it from ever coming back. As you can see, we've got a little bit of clearance, but not a ton of clearance. We've got about a 1/16 of an inch, roughly 2 millimeters. I think we're ready to glue her in. We're going to glue it back on. We're going to use the Titebond Original. Every time I do this, people say, why aren't you using hide glue? Well, I'll just tell you straight up and down. I've got a video out there that you can go look at on removing the neck on my own guitar that I built and resetting the neck, and I glued it on with Titebond Original. It took me less than 15 minutes on camera to take the neck out of it with this glue. This guitar, glued with what appears to be hide glue originally, took me close to an hour to get it out of there. It's just as easy to remove a neck with Titebond, and I think easier. It's very water soluble. The original now, you can't use the new stuff. And it's very water soluble. It works with heat really well. So you do what you want, I'll do what I want, and we'll all be happy. I've got this fitting. This joint fits just as tight as any neck joint you could ever want. When you have them fitting that tight, by the way, you don't need a ton of glue, because it's a tight joint and there's not a lot of room for the glue to go around. So you just want to get just a very thin coat of glue coverage everywhere. Working it down in the slot as tight as I can get it down in there. I'm sure I could pick the guitar up by the neck already, no problem. It's that tight. And the other thing I'm going to do is just make sure the fretboard extension fits on good, that it's not raised up. It feels real good. If anything, it might be just a fraction of a hair high, but this hasn't been cleaned off yet. There's a lot of junk on the back, so we should be real good. I'm confident we can make it fit. Now, as I mentioned, I cut a wedge here, and I'm going to use it, but I want to make sure it's going to be the right wedge. Now, you got to be careful when you drive a wedge into anything in wood. They have a lot more force than you might think. And driving it down in there will bust this out if you're not careful. So when I say put it down in there, tight, I just mean like, hand tight, a little bit more than hand tight, maybe a very light tap with a light hammer, but definitely don't force it beyond that. Or at least a previous video, I talked about these little miniature scrapers. I couldn't find this one. I just found it. I was cleaning the office and sure enough found it on the floor. I think part of my problem is the top of the groove here is got a little stuff in it, so I'll clean that out a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on this, right on the end. It's not going to go in very deep. Again, the purpose of this is just to make sure this neck doesn't lift back up, and this will definitely add a lot of strength right there. Now I'm just going to take this chisel, and I'm not driving it down in there real hard, as you can see. I just want it snug and tight. That alone tightened up this neck joint. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on the neck joint, just a little bit, and tap it a little bit more. I'm putting my elbow down here on this heel, pressing down. and I'm just tapping it lightly. You can see I'm not driving it down in there. That would not be a good idea. And I think I've got it every bit as tight as I feel comfortable going. I don't want to go any tighter than that. Now I'll clean up the extra glue and we'll cut that off and see what our angle looks like. I think that worked real nice. Now let's just see what our angle is. I have a feeling our angle is probably a little bit better now. At least I hope it is. It's not much different. Maybe just a fraction higher. Let's see, in millimeters, I would say we're 2.5 millimeters above that, and I think I can live with that. More than a 1/16 of an inch. I think we can live with that. I think we'll be just fine. I can feel a tiny bit of a hump there. We'll probably have to cut that off. I think the neck's gonna fit back on here. Maybe just a slight, very slight hump there. I think we're looking real good on it. I'm gonna look at here and see if we got a huge hump there. We don't have much of a hump there. Got to clean off this extra glue around the joint. I don't think you could do it much better than that. Just, if anything, just a 1/2 millimeter more angle would be fine. But I think I'm comfortable with where it's at. I think we can make a real good setup on that guitar this way. I don't think we'll have any problem. Well, this guitar is pretty far along. We're on the downhill stretch now. We've got 2 frets out of it. You know, I glued this fretboard extension back on overnight and it looks just perfect, really does. You really can't hardly tell the neck's been off of this now, other than the little line that just happens right there where you cut through that fret. And other than that little tiny line, you really can't tell it. In other words, I didn't have to break this whole seam along here or anything. So that's really good. I could probably do a fret job as this is and get one more use out of these frets. But since we've already got 2 out anyway, and they're in fairly bad shape, and the fretboard needs so much work, I think I'm just going to go ahead and pull the rest of the frets out, clean the whole fretboard up, and put new frets in it, and call it a done deal. I think that's probably the way to do it. I've soaked it down real good. Hopefully that'll keep minimize the tear out as I pull the frets out. Rosewood is really bad for tear out though, so I'm expecting tear out even though I'm taking a lot of precautions here. I'm trying to work the pliers all the way across there rather than just lift it up and pull the fret out, to keep the little wooden pieces pushed back down as I lift the fret out. Wow, those are really tight. I don't think I've ever had a single fret that tight before. I mean, usually they just pop right out. Man, those last 2, they don't want to come. Well, that was another one of those tough fights. I don't know that I've ever had those 2 especially, but every fret that was still on this extension was really hard to get out, and those 2 especially, those last 2, I even went and smoothed this out to get it flatter, and man, it was just really hard to get them. And even after I got them raising, I couldn't get them out of the rest of the slot. They were super tight. I think they must have been glued in addition, but man, they were just hard to get out. Can't explain why for sure. I got my little sanding block here, and I've got some 220 on this. This is a radius fingerboard, so you have to stay mindful of that. And as long as you keep it moving and keep it, you know, about the same amount of time on all of it, you can easily sand an arch fretboard with a flat block. It's not hard to do at all. Done it many times. I like smaller blocks like this. They apply more pressure in a specific place. You get a long block and all that, and yeah, sure, that keeps it. For the novice, that's perfect, because if you've never done it before, that'll keep you good and flat. I've done it many times. I know how to keep it good and flat, and this works better for me. Getting better, but there's still a lot of fingernail holes in this. At this point is where everybody talks about glue and sawdust for filling these things. And while I have done that in the past many times, it is not my favorite method for doing that, for filling these holes. And the reason is, it always shows up, and it shows up pretty bad. It's still pretty darn deep in places, there's no question. I think I'll give it one more round with one more piece of fresh sandpaper and call that good, put the frets back in it, and then if I need to touch them up a little bit more, we will with a straight razor blade, or we will with some filler, which would probably, in this case, I'll probably just use clear super glue and just fill them with that and level it off. The super glue lets you see the wood right through there, and actually I think it looks better than filling it with a dark putty, because when you mix the glue and the sawdust, it doesn't match the wood. You think it does, but it really doesn't, especially in a big area. Little tiny spots, no problem. But these great big areas, they don't work so well. Just thought I'd let you see that it's absolutely perfectly flat after that sanding. There might be 1/1000th of an inch under bow right in here, or relief, or whatever you prefer to call it. I prefer to call it what it is, which is under bow. But because of that, and let's see here, we've still got decent clearance back here, about a 1/16th of an inch, maybe a hair more. But because there is just the tiniest, and I'm really talking like 1/1000th of an inch, I can't even really see daylight through it. The reason I know it's there, I can see a tiny bit of daylight through it. The reason I know it's there is because the ruler moves a little easier in that spot than it does from here to here. So I'm going to take just a little bit more off the front of this, and that'll also give me slightly more angle. Just check it and see if that improved it. It's pretty darn flat. Now there is a little bit of fall off back here, but that's pretty much to be expected. You can't have a straight line at an angle to a flat surface and expect it to stay flat. It's gonna have to fall off here. That's just the way it is. But that's not much of a fall off. It's because I don't have a huge angle on it. I've got really just about the right angle, I believe. I really think that's about as good as it's going to get. It's just about perfectly flat. I really would call that perfectly flat. And I think we're ready to clean it up and put the frets back in it. Now, just because I can, I'm going to take this fret saw and slide it through every slot to clean it out, and just to make sure there's nothing in it, and so that when we start to drive the frets in there that we won't have any trouble. I don't want to press my luck. I think we're going to call that good. No damage. And I think the slots are clear enough that we can put frets in. Just checking the depth of the slots. This one here, for whatever reason, is not as deep as the rest of them. going to go ahead and go a little deeper with this one. Thanks again to Carlos for sending me this fret wire. The fret wire that he sent to me is just the perfect size to put on this. I actually had some that would work fine, but this was just a little closer to the original, and so we'll put this on there. The fretboard is radius, so therefore I'm going to run these pieces through my homemade radiuser. And I don't know how I'm going to let you see this because it's going to be on the wrong side. If I turn it this way, maybe you can see it. And I can open this up until the fret wire just starts to go through, then close it down just a little bit and just run it through by hand. A lot of the fancy ones have a crank on them and all that, but I find it so easy to do this that I don't see any reason for a crank. It just goes right on through. Just bend it a little bit more. Pull it back through, and I can check it to see if it looks like it's fitting the radius. It needs to go a little bit more, wouldn't hurt nothing. That's really very, very close, but we could go a little bit more. It never hurts to have a little more than not enough, and that way the ends of the frets stay in better. So there you go. Actually, that one's a little bit more than this one, so I'll just run this one back through. What the heck, and then they'll be the same. Almost identical to the same now. I'd say they are identical. So that works really good. Just my homemade fret wire bender. I've got the block under the neck supporting it. I've got the wire here. This wire is so curled, I've got it hanging off the side of the table here so that it'll fit. I could pre-cut them, there's no question, but it's just, you don't waste any wire this way. Using a plastic hammer. This pad, there's a leather pad here, plus there's a cushion of this carpet, so it kind of absorbs a lot of the shock. It makes a lot of noise, but it absorbs the shock pretty well. Like I said, you don't know what you know till you know it. I didn't know I was going to replace these frets until after I got it all glued back together. And when I say I didn't know it, it's just that I hadn't made my mind up to do that. I was really going to refile them. Well, in hindsight, it would have been a real good decision to put these frets in while I had this fretboard extension off. It would have been much better to put them on the table. Well, you know, you can only do what you can do. Now that I've made the mistake, it's just as easy though. I can clamp them in and mash them down with this little tool here. And it mashes them down really, really well. You can get the frets in on the rest of it because it's over that block. It's not near as bad. It's not great, but it's not near as bad. Driving out here is really bad. You can't really drive out here. So this works actually surprisingly well. These handles are padded too. I'm going to put some leather underneath the block here where I'm hammering down on leather on that deal, so that way it'll give it a little bit more support and take out some more of the jarring effect. It looks good. All but this last one now looks fine, and this last one is not that bad. I just need to get something in there and support it. Thought I'd show you the method I went with to get this last fret in all the way. I've got a block of wood underneath here that takes up the space, and so we're pressing between a big block of wood and this fret, and all of a sudden I can't get it to move. Got leather on both sides of this clamp, by the way. It's just a lot less traumatic to clamp the fret into place than it is to pound it into place. that looks pretty good, really. I think we might be good with that. So that's what I did. I just put this block of wood in there and then squeezed between it. So those are simple ways to do things like that you would have in your own shop probably. Now we're going to cut all the ends off level and smooth. It's almost perfect. Okay, now we got to do this, and this is a little harder. And for doing this, filing these edges, I'll be using this same file, but the thing is, if you just put tape down, first of all, the tape can pull your finish off sometimes on these old finishes. Second of all, the tape isn't strong enough to keep the steel from cutting in. So I've got a real thin piece of plastic here. It's actually a notebook binder is what it amounts to. Let's see about how thick it is. Oh, it's almost a millimeter thick. It's 37 thousandths. So, you know, it's, and then I've got this little spring clamp here, which got rubber pads on it to kind of help hold it there for me. I'm holding it with my left hand also. And that's a lot better protection than anything else I can think of. It's because this hard plastic, it's hard. It's not, you're not going to file through it easily. I've leveled all the frets with the flat file, and I'm just going back with the recrowning file now and knocking off that flat spot a little bit. I also like to touch up the ends of the frets so that they don't feel sharp. They really feel nice. I think we're in very, very, very good shape. It probably hasn't been in that good a shape for 40 or so years. I'm going to polish the frets with some 600 grit sandpaper, and then I will take a single edge razor blade and clean up between the frets one more time. Oil the fretboard, and the next time you see this, we'll be working on the intonation here. So I'm not going to film any of the rest of that because I've done it so many times. Well, the fret job turned out really nice. Now we're moving on to, getting ready to do the intonation and all that. But before I did that, I decided to be sure to get these cracks filled with CA glue. I did these here off camera. I actually did this one off camera by putting tape on both sides of it and putting a very fine bead of CA glue down through there. But after removing the tape and, cleaning up and everything, I'm just not happy with it. I think it still needs more application. So instead of the tape deal, I'm just going to use it this way. I'm going to hold the guitar up so that the CA glue, and then that way I'm keeping the bottle pointed up so you're not dumping it out. That's a real trick to using the CA glue, is keeping it controlled. And that works really well if you're just careful, And then before it has a chance to dry, I wipe it down the crack like that with the cloth. And it looks like it's pretty full now. I will tell you something that I've learned I knew this already, but I kind of forgot it. And that is with this 2P10, and that's what I'm using. It works fine for filling these cracks, but any typical thin CA glue will work just as well. But the negative of the 2P10 is that the accelerator, while it doesn't turn it white, it eats up your finish. I mean, it really is caustic to your finish. So you got to be very careful. If you let it dry, it probably won't hurt your finish, but if you try to wipe it off like I did, it dulls your finish really bad. Where the accelerator that comes from Stumac, it doesn't seem to affect the finish very much at all. So, I'm really not happy. So many people are just hyped on this 2P10 stuff. Well, They can be hyped all they want. I'm not overly sold on this stuff. I think it works fine just as typical CA glue, but beyond that, I'm not real happy with it. I was going to buff this all out anyway, and I think that's what I'm going to do. Try to clean up a little bit. There's a little bit of roughness right around the edge here where I took the old bridge off, and I'd like to clean that up a little bit. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to use a combination of semi-chrome polish and buffing and, you know, maybe even some light sanding and all kinds of things to try to clean up the top here and bring it back up into real nice condition. One of the ways that I'm getting up right against this bridge is I've just taken 600 wet or dry sandpaper. I've got a popsicle stick blunted off, and I put it on there like so, and then I can control how I can get right into the corner and take the sandpaper like this, and it's doing a nice job, really is. It's, I'm sanding across the grain, which I don't like typically, but you pretty much got to do what you got to do when you get into these tight places. Then you can work it back and forth like this after you get the worst of it out. And so it starts to, look pretty decent then. Well, I think we're gonna try buffing that out with a little bit of this semi-chrome polish up close to it before I do the whole top. Really get rid of the dullness right around the edges there. That helps a lot. Doesn't make it completely unnoticeable, but it sure makes it a lot better. And now I'm just going to take this. I'm using it on a dry towel. It seems to buff a little bit more on dry towel than it does with a wet towel. And I'm trying to blend this back in here where I hit it with that 2P10 accelerator. I will point out right here in this area, probably from a shirt or something, there's fabric patterns and different patterns in this that probably won't show up in the camera because they're pretty subtle. Let me get out here in the light and see if you can see that. You can at least see how dull it is, even if you can't see the pattern. And let's see if we can get rid of that. I don't know if that'll show up now, but I don't think it's near as dull looking as it was. Try to get the light in the right place there. It's maybe a little dull still, but not bad compared to the way it was. We're going to pretty much go over the whole top with this stuff because it just needs it, and it'll clean it up and make it look a lot better, and then we'll buff it out. I think it'll be fine then. And this finish, I don't know if I would almost call it getting soft. This is, I think, hardening it back up. It's like there's some kind of a muck over the top of it. And this is taking it off and crisping that finish back up. This ought to help the sound a lot, actually. It's really funny. You can feel the difference after you get through that layer of muck or whatever it is. It's like it's almost like driving a car in mud, and then you get out on hard pavement. You can just feel the difference. So much different. And that's the way it feels here. After the second or third coat, it starts to glide, where the first coat is really muddy. It just feels really sticky. Top feels so much more solid now. There's no give and bump and all that. Truthfully, we didn't get all that hump out of here. We didn't, but we got enough out, and I think more importantly, we stabilized it where I don't think it'll come back anymore, which is really good. That bridge plate I put in there is much better bridge plate than what was in there. The bridge plate that was in there was just a joke, in my opinion. Looks so much better. Hope it's showing up in the picture that it's looking so much better. Now this pick guard, ordinarily I don't really recommend putting chemicals on your pick guards. I really don't. But there's such a dullness to it around this. There's one shiny spot here in the middle and the rest of it's really dull. I don't know, I may regret it, but I'm going to go ahead and try a little bit of this on here and see if it cleans it up. Yeah, it's taking that dullness right off. I can see it already. And that dullness is a sticky substance. It's, yeah, wow, that's weird. I don't know what that stuff is. I guess it's just DNA, you know. I mean, I really don't know what else it is. Well, that looks a lot better to me, to my eye, than it did. It really looked bad. I was going to take it to the big buffing wheel, but I don't really feel like I need to do that after hand buffing it out there. I'm not trying to make it look brand new. I'm just trying to make it look like it's been cared for. So I think I'm just going to wax it and call that good. I took this back to the buffing wheel, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not satisfied. It just didn't buff out very good. There's still all kinds of crummy looking junk on here that the buffing wheel just wasn't taking off. So I didn't even bother with the side. I wiped this lower side down by hand, and you can see it looks pretty good. It's fairly shiny. But it was worse than the upper side here, and you can see how dull it is. You know, it's pretty dull, but the other side was far worse, I guarantee you. And what I used to clean that was, I just used some more of this metal polish, but it's Fitz metal polish in this case. And I just used it on a rag, and you know, it works pretty good. Let's try it back here now. Hopefully you can see in the back here, there's some, I don't know, dullness, and it just won't go away. It's like right in here, and you can just see it. With your eye, you can see it really good. I don't know if it's showing up very well there in the camera. It doesn't look like it to me. It's very hard to tell, but here it's just got, I don't know, it almost looks like you took a paintbrush and wiped across it or something, and just, you know, it's just, except that it's clear and it just looks bad. So let's see if the Fitz metal polish will get rid of that. I don't know if it will or not. It's got a mild abrasive in it, and maybe it'll buff that out of there. Oh yeah, it did. It took it right off. And yet the buffing wheel didn't take it off. I was trying with the buffing wheel and thought, well, the buffing wheel will knock that off there, but it wouldn't. Yeah, that's clean, perfectly clean now. So I'm going to do the same thing over this whole back. And as a matter of fact, I'm doing this whole instrument with this kind of stuff and trying to buff all the gook off of it. And then I'll probably take it to the buffing wheel yet and try to polish it up a little bit more. By the way, this is all off the clock. I'm not charging the customer for all this cleaning and buffing. I should, but I figure this was such a big job and we're not done yet. I'll just give him a little bit of benefit here. That looks a lot better, a lot better. Hopefully you can see this little smudge right here. Get it in the light. There's a smudge right there. I think you can see it. That's the kind of stuff that was all over this, and it just doesn't come off easy at all. So there's a small one there that we can demonstrate to you how this kind of thing with some elbow grease will take it off of there. Like I said, the buffing wheel didn't even touch it. There, it just went. I could see it going very slowly, but it finally went. Well, the whole back looks so much better now. It's still banged up from whatever that was that caused those scarring. Well, that's about as good as it's going to look for a free buff job. Just imagine what it would look like if he was paying me. We're going to get started putting this thing back together and making it make some noise. So here we go. If you watched the whole video, then you know all the work we've done on this thing up to this point, and it's all building up to putting the strings on here. The first step is, in this case, is the nut. The nut came off during the process, which is common. And, you know, if I thought this nut could be improved with just by making it bone rather than plastic, I'd go ahead and do it. If there's a problem with this nut, I would change it to bone. But to be honest, this is one of the most time-consuming parts of instrument setup. And if you don't have to replace it, I say don't bother with it, because it costs so much to do this, and you get very little payback unless there's a problem. You know, I mean, if it's too low, sure, you got to change it. If it's, you know, buzzing or something, you got a problem. If it's chipped or broke, you got a problem. But if it's clean and nice like this one, use it again. And I say that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to go ahead and glue it back in place. I don't put very much glue on there. That new canopy glue that I'm using is my favorite for gluing these in now. It tacks up pretty darn fast, yet you can break it apart if you need to, if there's a problem down the road. Seems to work really good. So I'm going to put that in there with that, let that start setting up. And I'll tell you, the state of the union on this is that we want to put a pickup in this guitar. And we're going to use the LR Baggs active I-beam system here. But we're not going to put it in yet until we get the saddle made and the saddle slot cut and all that kind of stuff. You can see the hole's already been cut for this type of pickup installation. So now I need to put something temporary in here so that I can put my little intonation rig on here and get the intonation set for this guitar. Well, can you say, old fiddlesticks? that's about what I feel like right now. I was just getting ready to put the first string on here for setting the intonation. And you know, you see this tuning key here? See how there's a little bit of play, but almost nothing? Now look at these. Look at this one. This one's got quite a bit. This one doesn't have too much. This one doesn't have too much. This one's got the least. But all the rest of them have just got tons of play in there, and I don't think that's right at all. It just doesn't feel right at all. You can just see it wiggling back and forth there, and that can't be a good thing. So, what do I do about that? These are those enclosed tuning keys, so I can't get to them real easily. These are not the originals, apparently, or if they are, they've been somehow, no, they're not the originals. They must have been an inline original, because you can see how there's an old mark around there, and I can see a full line all the way down. So there must have been some inline tuning keys on this originally. Well, I don't want to put this back together like this, because it ain't right. So let me just see if we can get one of these apart. I don't know if it's possible. This one's pretty bad, so let's see if we can get this one apart first. I also see a little, like a ring washer thing on this, which can't imagine why. I was hoping I'd see something that would let me take this apart, and not so much. I can see two little tabs here, but I'm afraid if I push them out, I'm not going to be able to get them back in. I'll probably hate myself for this, but I'm going to push it out and see what happens. Looks like somebody's already done it before, to be honest. I think these have been taken apart before, now that I see this. Yeah, I got it off of there. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. This just sits in there. Wow, and that's something. I've never really seen a set made like that before. I've never taken these apart, of course, so they may all be made that way, but can't imagine why it would have that much flexibility to it. There's this little tiny weird washer thing right here too, which I don't know if that's supposed to be there. Maybe that's supposed to be on the inside. I'm going to pull it on the inside, see if that makes a difference. That might actually make a difference, believe it or not. Maybe that's the problem. I don't know. Like I said, I ain't never seen nothing like that. I tightened this screw up. I'm going to put this back on in the same orientation. Well, it has to go on in the same orientation. You can't change it around the way it's made. And I'm going to see if I can force it back down in that little hole. Like I said, I don't think I'm the first one to take that apart. I don't know though if that did any good or not. I'd say it's improved, but it's not much better. Let me see if those washers are out anywhere else. That's the only one I see the washer out on. But all of them have a lot of play in them. I'm going to just chalk that off to say that's the way it is. We're not going to improve that, and I don't think I'm going to try. I don't want to fix a problem we don't have. If there's just play in it, that doesn't really hurt anything other than the fact there's play in it. Won't know till we start tuning it up if it's affecting anything. Here's what I did for the end pin. I just made myself a tapered pin, wooden pin, put a plastic strap button on it there, and I'll hook my little string gizmo into that. This is just, people ask about this all the time, and it's just coat hanger wire that I soldered together, bent some hooks in it to hold on to the strings and hook it around the tail pin. And then you got to put, protection in here. I get some real thin leather for the top. That's what works best in this case for the top. Every one of these is a little different, so you just kind of find the right shim for that particular guitar. And then I'll also put a shim back here of leather so when it pulls tight it won't hurt anything. But we got to get a string on it before we get some tension on there before all this leather will stay where it's supposed to. So here we go. Well, the old good news, bad news. Good news is I think the bridge and the neck and all that's going to work out fine. It's going to have a little taller saddle on it than I prefer. Actually, that's going to be just about right where it's at. It's going to be very close. I haven't checked it to see exactly what the action is at the 12th fret, but I can tell it's, if anything, it's on the low side. Let me see if I can tell you real quick here what it is. Looks like it's about 75 roughly on the big E, and about 70 on the little e. So it's pretty good right where it's at. Could be just a fraction higher, wouldn't hurt anything. Although a lot of people play them right there. The bad news is I'm hearing a vibration. And I had heard no vibrations in this at all until I got it under tension. Now under tension, I'm hearing a vibration. Now, I don't know if it's my rig. I don't think so, because the rig seems solid. I don't think the rig is doing anything. I don't know what that is. I'm suspecting a loose brace, but I don't know what it is. I don't hear it too much on this side. I start hearing it when I get on this side. So I'm going to suspect there's a loose brace in here. That's my suspicion. You just can't win for losing sometimes. While I've got it strung up here though, I'm going to go ahead and get this intonation perfect. It's pretty darn close right now. Pretty close. Close. Right on the money. Okay, so here we go. There's the E. Pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. So I'm going to mark that right there. I'm going to sharpen this pencil and put a mark right on that front edge. Okay, the front edge mark is the important mark, but just for good measure, something happens. I put one on the back side too. But the front mark is the important one because that's the last place this touches the saddle. Now we're going to unstring this and see if we can figure out where that rattle's coming from. I definitely hear something. I don't hear it when I shake it. I don't know. We'll look around, see if we can find something. I turned the camera on, but I didn't turn it on. In other words, I didn't push record. The camera viewfinder was on, so I thought the camera record was on. I found the loose braces. They were on this side over here. They're the little short braces that go this way. And this is the front one, and this is the back one. And they were both just as loose as they could be. They were literally hanging loose in there. All I had to do was just pull them out from under the end of the brace that they were stuck to. I checked the short braces on this side, and they're tight. I had a tough time finding these because everything sounded like it was rattling over here, but it was actually right over here. I've heard if you don't see it on camera, then it never happens. So there's how I'm gluing the two braces back in. I just put them in back by hand. I could feel the place where they used to be. I put good glue on there and then clamped them up good and snug. And I think they'll be fine now. It's been a tough fight, and I think we got rid of that mystery rattle inside the guitar there by clamping up those two braces. It's the next day, and I'm about ready to finally cut the slot in the saddle, for the saddle. And here's the rig I've come up with. You've seen this rig before. The difference is I've had to add more clamps. I always put these two clamps on, but I also added this clamp pushing against it in the back here. I just want pressure against this so this doesn't move back. Note to self, don't wax the top until you've done this. This stuff here, it's got rubber pads on it and they usually stick right in place. Not with that wax, they slide, but it's just like ice. Everything's really slick. So, and I had to clamp this down, which I don't even clamp this side because it's just there, but it moves around so easy too on that wax that I clamped it also. I tentatively lined this up, but I've got a lot more work to do yet to get the router in here and get the bit set to the right depth. So we'll show you what that looks like when we're ready to cut the slot. Well, I know the lighting's not the best in this particular case, but that's just too bad. I have to have it at an angle where I can see the lines good. I am about ready to cut them. I've got the router set so that it's going to take about 100 thousandths depth of cut. Well, that cut it roughly 100 thousandths deep, or it should have. So let's just see how deep it says it is with the calipers. 104 thousandths of an inch, so pretty accurate, not bad. As a matter of fact, I kind of figured it would be just a hair deeper because that's kind of the way I set it. I'm going to now set it for another, I'll set it for another 75 thousandths deep for sure, and we'll take a look at that and see how I like that. I know I've showed setting the depth on this in the past, and I've probably done it more awkward than I should have. I think someone suggested, and I should have known this anyway, but someone suggested using the other end of the caliper to set the depth. I've been doing it this way, and you know, the problem with that is you rock this way and then it gets off. They said, well, just use the other end of your caliper and set it across there and push this down to it. Well, you know, I should have thought of that. I just didn't. I don't know why I didn't think of it. Sometimes you just get in a rut and you do the same thing over and over. And so whoever suggested that, I appreciate it. All right, I'm going to double check my measurement here. I think it should measure somewhere around 430 4 thousandths, something like that. 410, and that's about, now that I think about it, I think that is where I set it. So 410 thousandths, I'm going to increase that by 75, so I want to take it to 485. Now the way I'll do that is I'll open this up, pull this up quite a bit higher. I'll set this on 485. There's 488, and I'm happy with that. It doesn't have to be exact. A couple thousandths here or there isn't going to make any difference. And now I can just push this down until the caliper head sits flat on there, and we should be just perfect. And now I'll tighten that up without that moving, hopefully. And I also use the pliers to snug it down, because the vibrations a lot of times, especially if you're making a deep cut, will drive that bit out of alignment or up higher or whatever. So let's get the compressor turned back on and let's make the last cut. Well, I just checked the depth. It's 177 thousandths. So that's, I said 175, that's 2 thousandths off. That's less than half the thickness of a human hair, so I'll take that. That's close enough for government work. And that looks nice and deep, and that's what I want, because we're going to have a tall saddle on this, and I want it deep, because otherwise, it would pull and create a problem if it was a shallow saddle. So I think that'll be just fine. And for the record, I did also ream these holes just a little bit. I mean, very little, but I did ream them just a little bit. I think we're ready now to measure this and make us a saddle that'll fit this slot. And so let's get the calipers set to 0 and see if we can tell what size we would need. I don't know, 115 thousandths range, somewhere in there. So I think that's where I'll try to make it. I'll try to make a saddle that's about 120 thousandths first. I'll start with that and see if that's going to fit, and it probably won't, but then we can just sneak up on it. I like to make them fit just as tight as we can get them to fit down in there without being ridiculous. I think you can see that it's just wanting to start down in there now. Not quite go all the way, but pretty close. I'm going to try to mark the length as carefully as I can. Take it down just a little bit more, and it should drop right in there then. I did a number of trial and errors off camera, and it pretty much looks like it grew in there. There's no space. Now I'm drawing a fine line across the back there and going to try to pull it back out, which may not be that easy to do. Since Carlos sent me these pliers with the rubber ends on, maybe I can get a hold of it with that and get it out of there without breaking anything. And the reason I do that is I want to make sure that the line that's going across there, perhaps you can see the line if the camera will focus, then that shows that it's at an equal depth all the way across there, which is very important to me. I want to make sure it's, it's not sitting up on a shelf or something like that. That looks really good. I'm proud of that. I think that's just about as good as it can be done. Making sure it's down in good and tight. And then here is the saddle that I used to kind of set the action, to kind of test the intonation with. And I feel like this saddle is pretty close, so I'm going to kind of use that as my mark here, and I'll leave that even a little proud, as I always do. We're about ready to install the I-beam active system pickup in this guitar. That's what we settled on, and I happen to have one in stock, so brand new, and we're going to put that in there. I am attempting to figure out just how far I need to to set this, because the tail block on these, you know, they're different thicknesses on different instruments, so there's no black and white standard. What I did to measure the thickness of this tail block is I just stuck this little bolt in there and pulled back on the head, and then I marked it with a Sharpie where as it passed through here. So now I have a good mark of how deep it is. I set my calipers to that, and now I'm trying to allow for that right here as I set this up, so that when I get inside and poke it through the hole, I'll have the right amount sticking out. Trust me, it's not that easy to do. You want to get the right amount sticking out. You don't want too little, you don't want too much. I think I'm going to settle on that and hope that that's right. Now I'm tightening these two things against each other. It's kind of like a jam nut, and it won't hurt to even try that a little tighter. I'll have to take it out to change it anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and call that good, since I did carefully measure it. And then hopefully we take this end off and put this on the outside. Hopefully we'll have the right amount sticking through. Like I said, if it wasn't for that oversized hole, this wouldn't be that hard, but that oversized hole, you got to keep this centered, and I think that's pretty good. We might actually, if we get trouble with that might have to wrap some paper or something around that to make it center in that hole better, because that hole is definitely oversized. There we go, just as perfect as it can be. You can see it came right out to the end, just like it should. This pickup comes with a rig to align your under saddle pickup. When I say under saddle, I mean under the saddle inside the guitar. It comes with this rig so that you can line it up precisely. I'm reaching in there first, just making sure that that's real clean and smooth under there and it feels perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and set this in place. And you know, this rig just sits down through these holes, and then you'll pull it up through the holes later, and that'll help line it up then. But first, I just want to eyeball this and get it directly above or directly below that saddle. And that's just about as perfect as you could get it right there. And so that'll, now when we put this down through and pull it up in there, this will be lined up with this saddle. And like I said, I've already checked to make sure that area is really good and clean in there. Just making sure there's no wires in the way. There we go. Just about to get it. And now I just want to pull it up nice and straight and even. And now I got it in there, and I'm pressing it with my hand in place, and I know it's exactly where it should be now because of this alignment tool. And now I'm really putting the pressure between my fingers here, pressing that in place, making sure that sticks to that plate really good. I think it's important to note that the old bridge plate that was in here, first of all, was so chowdered up that it was so, you know, rough, this wouldn't have stuck to it anyway, number one. And number two, it was so small it would never fit on there. That bridge plate is, I mean, the old bridge plate. This new bridge plate should accommodate this with no problem whatsoever, and it's perfectly smooth. And now we've got that, so now we just have to peel this back off, and so you can see the little sticky dots, they stayed on there. And the pickup itself is perfectly in place. So now we just need to clean up all the wiring inside and put the battery on, and we're done with that installation. Well, friends, I don't exactly believe in jinxes, but if I did, I'd say this guitar is jinxed. Holy mackerel, I just started putting the strings on it. It starts sounding real good, tuning it up, and sure enough, the tuning key popped off. Now, I'll admit, that's the one I took apart. There's no doubt. I'm not going to say it's not. But I didn't take this one apart, and it's about to come off too. And it's all that play that's in these keys. Now, they don't have any play on them while the strings are tight, but there's so much play. And I don't know, they say Gibson Deluxe, but I don't think these are real Gibson Deluxe tuning keys. I think these are some cheap knockoff or something. They're definitely aftermarket, or they're definitely not the original tuning keys, because you can see there was long strip tuning keys on here. I wouldn't give you 50 cents for all these. You could pile in the back of a pickup truck. I thought I had some of these, and so I went looking, and I've got a cheap knockoff version, but they don't have any play in there. There's no play in these at all. And these are cheap knockoffs of the original. And they're not, you know, they're not made the same, as you can see. They got holes in different places, etc., etc. So I'm not suggesting we put these on there, but I just thought I'd check them, you know, and like I said, they have no play in them whatsoever. They're just as solid as they can be. Where these have so much play in them, it's just, I've never seen tuning keys with that much play before. So now I don't know what to do. What a pain. Guess I'll have to back up 5 and punt like I often have to do. This one is also lifting up right here. If you look at it really close there, I think you can see how the back of it's lifting up. And it wouldn't surprise me if the rest of these don't lift off there either, as loose as they are. But this one's going to come off too. There's no doubt about it. It's just get the right, if you just bump it just right, that's going to pop right out of there, with under string tension especially. So I don't know what to do about this. You know, it's definitely not a good thing. I don't know if I should try to repair this one or just contact him. I hate to call people and say, hey, you know, these are bad, you know, because like then they start to think, well, you know, you're just running the price up on them and trying to sell new stuff, and that's not the case at all. These things are just junk, in my opinion. There, it snaps back together, but there's nothing to hold it there. And this is some cheap pot metal. It's not, I'm 99% sure this won't solder. If I thought it would solder, I'd just go ahead and try it. But, well, hopefully you can see here, I've got this clamped together. That pushes the two parts together the way I have it clamped. I can see that they more or less bradded this part to it before, and I'm going to try the same thing. Hopefully that it'll stay. That should hold it, I would think. It smashed it out there. I've got this punch is a real tiny little point punch. It's got a point on it. Anyway, I'm just smashing it and spreading it out. I'm trying to get it located just right before I hit it. But I think that'll probably hold it. This screwdriver is, I think, possible too. I don't think that'll come apart again. I think I've got it mashed as good as it was from the factory, at least. I would try soldering it, but I can tell it's the kind of stuff that isn't going to solder. It says made in Germany. Now, my bet is these are some kind of knockoff, and they even copied the little label that says made in Germany. That's my bet, because I've never seen tuning keys this crappy before, especially with this much slop in them. These things really have slop in them. They even after tightening that up, that's as tight as you can get it. Hopefully it'll focus there. That's as tight as you can get that. There's no gap in it anywhere, and there's still a lot of slop in this. Well, there's not as nearly as much, but there's still slop in there. Maybe you can see how much slop is in that. Focus, you pecker. Yeah, there you go. Maybe you can see how much slop is in there. It's still a lot of slop. And that's as tight as you're ever going to get that. I think that'll hold now. I really do, or I wouldn't even bother putting it back on here. I think I'm going to take this other one off that's coming apart, do the same thing to it, brad it out and make it tight, because it's going to come apart. There's no doubt about it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one back on. I'm pretty sure it'll hold now, at least as well as it did new, and kind of think I'm going to take this one off because it's coming loose, and I know it's going to come off of there. I know it will, just by looking at it, even though I didn't take that one apart originally. Before I take the other one apart, I'll see if this one holds, and then if this one holds, then I'll do the same thing to the other one because it's going to come apart, I can tell for sure. Trying to zoom you in, trying to get you zoomed in here on the 12th fret so that you can see this is the 90 thousandths, and it slides in there and the string doesn't move. I mean, doesn't move. And the same way, here's the 80 thousandths, which is what I use on the other side, and the string doesn't move. So 90 to 80 is perfect. Up here, I haven't checked it yet, and it looks really good. My guess is it's about 10 or 12 thousandths. It's pretty darn good. And it's pretty amazing to take one all the way apart, put the neck back on it, put a saddle on there and everything, and not have to adjust it. But right now it doesn't look like I have to adjust it. Here's 12 thousandths. It's a little higher than that. Of course, that's okay in my opinion. It's right at 12 thousandths on the middle string there. Yeah, it's really good. It's just about 12 thousandths. I don't see how you could get it much better. So everything seems perfect on it except that one tuning key that's coming loose, and now it's even up higher, so it's going to come off of there. There's no doubt about it. It just hasn't done it yet. Let's see. Can you see it there? It's this key here. And you can see how the back is lifted up, I think. The other ones are tight. And the one I fixed, this is the one I fixed here, and it's tight. But this one here is the one that's still lifted up. So I think I'm going to have to take it off and fix it too. So that's what I'm going to do. That's the G string, by the way. The one that I fixed was the D string. Well, I braided these two little prongs out on this one too. And hopefully you can see that it's just as tight as it can be now also. And hopefully it'll stay that way when we put it back on here. I don't know what to say. It's tuned up. It's up to pitch. I just checked the intonation. Everything looks good. The intonation can be adjusted a little bit more on the saddle, which I will do. This string is about 9 cents sharp. That's the big E string. This one's about 5. And then these two are perfect. This one is about 5 sharp, and this one is perfect. So we will file the B back a little bit and angle these two back a little bit too, and which is very common. You see that very often on saddles. I adjusted the saddle here. As you can see, I notched this back and I put an angle back on this here, which is very, very common on bridges for guitars. So let's just see how good the intonation is. I haven't checked it yet. Pretty darn close. That's either right on or just a hair sharp. Right on or hair flat even. Right on, I think. Actually, right on the money. There's the D. That's right on the money. There's the G. Right on the money. Now here's the B. I haven't checked it yet. Right on the money. That's pretty darn close too. So I don't see how you could get one much closer than that on intonation and action and everything. So what I'm going to do is just let it set at full tension overnight, considering, we put a whole new neck on this thing, new bridge plate, new bridge, fret job, and checked, of course, the intonation, made a new saddle, everything. So everything's pretty much new, and, and it's under tension for the first time in several months. So I'm just going to leave it under full tension like right now, and I'll check it in the morning. And we'll see how much it dropped. I would imagine it'll drop a little bit because for one thing, it's got new strings too. So, you know, it's going to drop a little bit, but I bet it won't drop very much. I think it's going to hold real well. I don't think he'll have any more problems with this guitar. Well, friends, I couldn't be much happier with this UK Gibson guitar. You know, it came a long ways to get to this little hole in the wall place. And I think we did it justice. I think we fixed her up really well. The intonation couldn't be any better. The sound really couldn't be any better, I don't think. The action couldn't really be any better. I think it's just as perfect as it's going to get. I think it'll last another, 50 to 100 years. I don't think it'll have to have anything done to it. I'm pretty positive that neck is going to stay where I put it. Pretty positive this bridge is going to stay where I put it because of putting that extra larger pad in there. And you can tell right off it doesn't hurt the sound when you listen to this thing. And we're going to play it for you right now. I'm going to do a song that I wrote. It's a true story song, and I want to tell you the story behind it because it won't make a lot of sense, I don't think, if you don't hear the full story. We played a show, a bluegrass show, up in Wentzville, Missouri. Been quite a long time ago. It's about 1 month after we played that show, my phone rang one day, and this gentleman says, "Hi, I was in the audience that night, and we watched your show and really enjoyed it, and I was just wondering, I have kind of an unusual request. I'm just wondering, did anybody take any pictures of the crowd that night?" And I thought, well, that is kind of an unusual question. You don't get that very often. So I tried to find out, and he goes, "Well, I really don't want to bother you with the details of that." He says, "I don't want to burden you with the issue." And I said, "Well, it wouldn't be no burden to me. If I knew what you were going for, it might help me find somebody that maybe would know something about it, And maybe they were sitting in your same area if you tell me where you were sitting, etc." Well, anyway, long story short, and it was a fairly long story because he did not want to tell me. Come to find out, he had just gotten out of the hospital that very day when he called me. On the way home from the show that night, they were in a really bad car wreck and it killed his wife. And of course, he was wanting to know if anybody had taken a picture of him and his wife together, and he wanted a picture of the last thing they did together. Well, it choked me up, just about like it's choking me up right now. When I hung up the phone, I immediately, like in that minute, wrote this song, and I hope you enjoy it. It's called "Did Anybody Take Her Picture?" So let me just play you a chord or two first so you can hear the sound of the guitar, then I'll play you that song. Well, friends, I wasn't real happy with the song version that I tried first, so I'm going to do it again. And it's been a couple of days. I'll just tell you as a follow-up, the guitar's been sitting fully strung up under tension for 2 or 3 days, and it only dropped about a half a note. So that's pretty good. I'm real happy with that. So here's the song. I hope you enjoy it. Did anybody take her picture? I've heard a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I'd like to have just one more conversation. So I'll have to let a picture speak for her. I didn't know it was our last night together, the last time I'd see her alive. Side by side we watched that show together, but on that lonely road that night she died. So did anybody take her picture? I've heard a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I'd like to have just one more conversation. So I'll have to let a picture speak for her. I never thought to take her picture. Well, it never once crossed my mind. But now that she has gone on forever, well, I think about it all of the time. picture. I've heard a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I'd like to have just one more conversation. So I'll have to let a picture speak for her. Yes, I'll just have to let a picture speak for her. Well, there was one more verse, but I thought I'd just spare you. So, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this series. This was a very challenging repair. I think it was worth doing. I think we did everything the way it should have been done. Sure, there were plenty of other options, but the options I chose, I feel like were the right things for this particular guitar. Thank you so much for watching. Please tell your friends about the channel. Hey, we're almost at 20,000 subscribers, and we have a mandolin giveaway when we hit that mark, so it won't be long now. Please click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and also click the thumbs up button, because that sure does help get these videos seen by more people. With more thumbs up, the algorithm puts these videos out as suggestions, so be sure to do that. Thank you very kindly.